My mother actually, she was always the trainer, the negotiator with not only the other races, but she also set up a work program so that my brother and all the others would know what to do and keep the scheduling, and actually to sort of maintain the property and keep the rules that had to be enforced daily, because she had two grown sons and they were willing to do the same kind of work because they were they were veterans, but they were kind of like backball from doing the kinds of things that they were equipped to do. And so this was all they had going for them, is their strength for the labor. And so that's why we went to Berkeley Landfill. That's why I was sort of recruited, although I didn't have a college education, because of all of the books that I was reading and all of the education, how I was self-educated. So therefore we really adhered to the contracts that was given us, that what we had to do. Like, we couldn't have shelter, permanent shelter there, regardless of the storm, and it was a 7-day-a-week program. And you can imagine the weather from 1963 through 86, and there was never a permanent shelter for any employee at the dump site itself. So all we did was, we were glad to just have a foot in the door, and so we performed the services as labor, and without any funds coming from the owners or management. The way that the payments were is that after hiring all of the laborers that were needed, there were a lot of laborers. Oh my God, you had to have somebody to actually sweep that bank. You never knew when somebody was going to come out there and inspect. So you had to sweep that bank about vehicles. You had to park the vehicles. You had to make sure that there was just nothing there for anyone to have a flat or any accident and all these kinds of things. And it was just really something. And so I ended up hiring ex-felons. I hired strangers. I hired, because this is what I was taught by my mother. All these kinds of things. And you would learn to do this, and at the end of the day, you would pay them. You would have to have their money, whether you made it or not. And so I had learned, because by the time mother turned it over to somebody, she could always pay at least 4, which meant $25 each, to each laborer, and pay them that when they left. At the end of the day, whether she sold anything or not, she paid them their $25 a day out of her own pocket. My family was never reimbursed, never, for anything out of that Berkeley landfill. Or we were actually sort of like, I just want to call it some kind of bartering, if you want to say that. We were just glad, as I said before, to be able to be there, to be sort of like the waitress, to be able to get the tips of things that we could learn to recycle. See, they didn't even have the word. And refurbish, they didn't have the word. And all these kinds of things. We created all of that and everything, because we'd go out there and sort everything. My mother taught us how to sort, the copper from the brass, from the iron, and where to sell it. It's, I think it was Stinson selling the metal. So if they went down, she would check the prices. We would go to the other ones, levels or whatever. And the thing of it is that she taught my brothers mechanics. And if she could read the book, she would help them with it. They ended up fixing the tractors, helping the people who were mechanicing on the tractors. It was sort of like a self-help tutorial program to keep us in sort of like the system, to keep us with just the bare necessities. But it did do this. It took care of my brother's family, both of them. It took care of my family. It took care of my sister's family, and all these kinds of things. And we had one daughter that went to UCLA at the time. And my mother, at the end of the week, would give me $50 to send to her. And the way I received the wage is that when I went there, okay, Margie, you know so much. So what you salvage, you sell at the Alameda Flea Market. I would be at the Alameda Flea Market at 6 every time on the weekends and all these kinds of things. And at 7:45, everything would be packed. I would be at Berkeley Landfill at 8 o'clock. I never was late. I made a salary way more than my mother and my brother made. I mean, it's the kind of thing where you just live within your means. That's what we did at Berkeley Dump. This was in the 60s, so I was in my 20s. Mother would get all these beautiful clothes. She needed help, so, I needed help too. 63, I had 5 kids. So I went out there to kind of like make ends meet and to support my mother. So that's how I ended up out there. Sometimes I would make $300, but I had to pay 4 people out of it. And then again, Mother taught us how to price everything. She taught us about the lumber. The people would just come if we could just some kind of way hide redwood enough for the person who buys. So then she told us to get the numbers. So we'd call somebody and say, we got a load of redwood. They would come and get it before 5 because they knew they had to do it. The same with the big stainless steel, equipment for kitchens. We got contacts, and so, but see, Mother did all of this. I could read about it in the antique books and say, Mother, this is valuable. And then she would say, you take it to the flea market, and this kind of stuff. But with everything else, she would help us keep the price range going because she knew what people were paying for it more. She read just as much as I did. So we appreciated the work because we did know how people were treated in other areas. Mother being from Mississippi, that's where she got her education.
Oh, wow.
And I'm being from Texas, where I was married. In other words, there's still people just would not go to the dump. They considered it just like everybody else. It was a low class job and all these kinds of things. But we lived through all of this. The garbage trucks and everything like this, because this is what I'm saying. We, at the time, the family was really doing all these kinds of things. People were learning to do this themselves. People were not recycling plastic. They were not recycling aluminum. They were not saving it. And so the family out there, they seeing us do this, and some did wear gloves, but not that many. No, we were there. We were just, Lord just took care of us because we were working hard. We were just naive and ignorant enough to really make it. We were never ill. I can't ever remember somebody saying, I got the flu. Never. I mean, things happen to us. Don't get me wrong, But it was never any kind of medical issue like that from being out there amongst everything known to man. And I mean that. I saw every chemical. Even when I couldn't read it I knew it was, it shouldn't have been out there. What's covered out there? But they need to cover all of that. You talking about the Brown Act. They need to cover all of that. That's one of the worst chemical sites in the world. I don't know why I'm still sitting here, just to sit here and tell you this, I guess. But the point of it is that it's really something. that the way that Berkeley said, and they didn't even start until way late, almost the 80s, or 70s or 80s, when they were concerned about chemicals, and by that time they had dumped everything,
Right.
But see, this is why you have to, really hope and pray whatever project they do, they cover it if it's going to involve children and all this kind of thing, and water pipes and whatever. But I'll tell you I've been talking about all this negative stuff, but let me tell you something about positive. We got a chance to see the boats. It's the most breathtaking view. The landscape and the water, everything just is beautiful from this dump site, and here we working, and everything like this. We could have been under the other people, but by that time, we were just doing what we were supposed to be doing. And as long as we didn't, do anything wrong or leaving something up and forget something, people didn't bother us. Because they knew that it could be worse. They knew they were going to have to be paying overtime and all these things. So they kept having fires. Now, see, we were supposed to be gone by 6 o'clock. The chemicals, all these toxics underground, I'm trying to tell you. Everything known to man is in there. I'm a witness. I know that. I may not be a scientist. I may not be a chemist. But I saw sites that you see in the nuclear bombs going up. How things the smoke turn to orange, and just keep doing it for just, I don't know how long, and everything like this. And then they needed always at least 3 people to load a truck. They had to load those trucks. And if they weren't there, I had to help load those trucks. That's what this here. I built up the muscle to do it. I could do it at that time. I didn't feel it, then. I just, thank God for the exercise that I did do. This was before all the bodybuildings and stuff like that and everything. Because it did, it was good for my family and its background and everything. My mother always said that she was a real Amazon, from Africa and everything. And I just have to tell you the story about my most precious find, how I would just give away stuff. At the time, because me being gone for so long, I knew I was going to have a problem with my children. But, so my son had gone to juvenile hall, the oldest one. And so I was just so concerned. And then even after getting off work, I'd have to go down there and, and try to see him and stuff like this. So I was at Berkeley, and I had found all of these comic books. And so I said, oh my God, the kids will love these. And I said, if they just allow my child to read one, I'll be so happy, blah, blah, blah. So I took all these comic books and I went through them. I knew what I was doing because, I'm from Texas. I had read all of them anyway. Number 1, Superman. Number 1, Hopalong Cassidy. Number 1, this, number 1, that. It was about 40 of them. I took those books to juvenile hall. That weekend, this had to be like a Thursday or Friday. That weekend, on the Johnny Carson show on TV, Superman, I think it was 150,000 or something like that at that time. I said, oh, I got that book. I said, oh, I took it to juvenile hall. Went the next day before 8 o'clock. It was not a book at that juvenile hall. Somebody went on with all of them.
Oh, so
they wanted to make sure they didn't miss any. It was not a book. I said, who's going to bring the children something to read? I got to get some more books for them. I mean, what can I say? I did it. And that's not the only treasure that I gave away. And then there were the University of California there in Berkeley. It was such a connection between my mother and I. You're not my brothers, my mother and I, with the students, because my mother had, would allow them to come and talk with me too, because you know they usually flock to someone older, and so they started coming even after my mother got sick and couldn't come. And they would come to me. I knew what was going on at that university more than I knew anything else, and everything. And this is the way they subsidized their education. Those who were in those real classes where they couldn't hold a job, they had to go back to class. They'd come out there and get something that was really antique, old, and everything. And I tell them, I say, you go research it. This will pay for this, and this will pay for. I let them have it. They'd sell it and bring me something. But what I'm saying to you, it was, I can remember, and even the one couple that ended up becoming lawyers, they used to talk to me. And they told me how they were claiming cats for dependents. And people, oh, they prided themselves on being thankful. There couldn't anybody say that they, because, these people own shops. They own businesses. And they were in business doing this. So we had what we call a doll lady. She came and got her little antique dolls, and, and redid them and stuff like this. And it was from dolls to lumber, and from lumber, to metals, different metals and everything. And people had a thing about just antiques, they were just going crazy at that time and everything. So it changed on later.